Dear you, you're moving. Every day, you're moving. Waking up, getting through things, handling what needs to be handled. And yet, there's a question that has started whispering in the back of your mind. One you don't answer out loud because you're afraid of what it might change. Why am I still doing all of this? Not in a dramatic way. Not in a hopeless way. Just in a quiet, unsettling way. You don't feel like quitting. You don't feel like giving up. You just feel like you're walking without a clear sense of direction, trusting momentum more than meaning. You're doing what comes next because something always comes next, and stopping long enough to question it feels dangerous. So you keep going. You tell yourself it's practical, responsible, necessary. You remind yourself that not everything needs to make sense emotionally. Life is about endurance after all, about pushing through phases where clarity is missing. You've done that before. You can do it again, but this time feels different. This time, the tiredness isn't in your body. It's in your sense of purpose. You notice it when small tasks feel heavier than they should, when achievements don't land the way they used to, when you reach checkpoints you once wanted and feel nothing. No disappointment, no joy. Just a quiet neutrality that lingers longer than expected. You don't talk about this much. How would you explain it? Saying, "I don't know why I'm doing what I'm doing anymore," sounds ungrateful or lost or dramatic, and you're none of those things. You're capable. You're functioning. You're still moving. But movement without direction starts to feel hollow. You might catch yourself thinking about rest, not because you're exhausted, but because you want the world to pause long enough for you to hear yourself again. You want a moment where nothing is required of you so you can ask the questions you've been postponing. If you're reading this and feeling a quiet recognition settle in your chest, it's because this experience is deeply shared. Many people don't stop living when meaning blurs. They continue. They adapt. They trust that clarity will catch up eventually. But sometimes, clarity doesn't arrive until you acknowledge that you're walking out of habit, not intention. You didn't lose your way overnight. You followed it faithfully for a long time. And now, something inside you is asking whether the path still belongs to you. This letter isn't here to tell you to turn around. It's here to sit with you at the moment you realize you might need to look up from the road and check the horizon again. That moment matters more than you think. You didn't keep going because you were numb. You kept going because you learned that stopping felt riskier than continuing. Somewhere along the way, you internalized the idea that momentum equals safety, that as long as you're moving, you're okay. That questioning direction is a luxury reserved for calmer seasons. So when meaning began to blur, you didn't pause. You adjusted your expectations. You told yourself not every chapter needs passion, not every effort needs emotional payoff. Sometimes, life is just about maintaining what you've built, protecting stability, avoiding disruption. And those reasons made sense, especially if you've worked hard to get where you are. You didn't want to appear ungrateful. You didn't want to waste progress. You didn't want to dismantle something before knowing what would replace it. So you stayed. Over time, staying became automatic. You stopped checking whether your actions still aligned with your inner values. You focused on external markers instead, deadlines, responsibilities, expectations. Those were easier to track than fulfillment, but fulfillment doesn't disappear when ignored. It waits. It waits until the absence becomes noticeable, until the routine starts to feel heavier, until the question shifts from "can I keep going?" to "why am I still going?" Another reason you stayed moving is because you're adaptable. You know how to make things work. You know how to adjust emotionally, mentally, practically. Adaptability is a strength, but it can also become a trap when it keeps you in situations that no longer nourish you. You didn't resist discomfort by stopping. You resisted it by becoming efficient. Efficiency kept you productive, but it also quieted your internal signals. Signals that might have told you sooner that something needed attention. Instead, they softened, blended into the background, and showed up as a vague sense of emptiness. You might wonder if you waited too long, if you ignored yourself for too many years, but this isn't about delay, it's about readiness. Awareness arrives when you're capable of holding it, not before. You're not confused because you lack direction. You're confused because your direction is changing, and change always feels destabilizing before it feels intentional. Understanding this doesn't require immediate action. It requires compassion. You did what made sense with the information and capacity you had at the time. Now, you're gathering new information from yourself. And that process deserves patience. You don't need to know exactly where you're going to stop walking blindly. You don't need a perfect alternative to admit that something feels off. Direction doesn't always come before honesty. Sometimes, honesty is what creates direction. You are allowed to pause internally, even if your life continues externally. You're allowed to ask yourself real questions without demanding immediate answers. You're allowed to acknowledge that what once made sense may not anymore. That doesn't erase your past effort. It honors your growth. You can begin by listening instead of pushing, by noticing what drains you and what quietly holds your attention, by paying attention to moments where you feel slightly more like yourself, even if you don't know why. These moments matter. You don't have to make dramatic changes. You don't have to announce anything. You don't have to justify your inner shift to anyone. The most important movement right now is internal, reconnecting intention to action. You may feel fear when you slow down. Fear of falling behind. Fear of losing momentum. Fear of disappointing someone, including yourself. But movement without meaning costs more in the long run than recalibration ever will. You are not obligated to keep walking just because you've walked this far. You are allowed to choose again. Choosing again doesn't mean starting over. It means continuing with awareness instead of habit. It means allowing your life to reflect who you are now, not who you were when you first began. You don't need clarity tonight. You need permission. Permission to stop pretending you don't feel this. Permission to trust that listening will eventually lead to movement that feels real again. Permission to believe that purpose isn't lost, it's reforming. Stay here for a moment. Let the noise soften. Let the road ahead blur without panic. You're not abandoning your life. You're finally checking in with it. And when you take your next step, it won't be because you were afraid to stop. It will be because you know why you're moving. Sincerely, you.